Welcome to Crime Over Wine Weekly. It's Sunday, February 18th. I'm Heather Holley, and here are your crime headlines. The parents of the OnlyFans model charged with murdering her boyfriend were arraigned in Miami this week. Courtney Clenny is accused of stabbing her boyfriend, Christian Obselli, to death in 2022. Now her parents, Kim and Deborah Clenny, are both charged with unauthorized access to a computer. According to arrest warrants, detectives recovered text messages between the couple and their daughter's attorney discussing the laptop and possible passwords. The defense says these charges are an attempt to, quote, bully the Clennys since there are witnesses in their daughter's case. In new court documents, Brian Landry's parents shared new details about, quote, the day everything hit the fan. Christopher and Liberta Landry reveal Brian called them August 29th, 2021. It was about 3 weeks before Gabby Petito's body was found. Roberta says Brian's tone completely changed, but she didn't want to push it, so they said goodbye. Roberta urged her husband to call their son back to check on him, so he did. Christopher says Brian was frantic when he answered, repeatedly saying Gabby's gone and he may need help. Christopher claims he never thought Brian killed Gabby. The Petito's family emotional distress lawsuit is expected to go to trial this May. Michelle Troconis' trial resumed Wednesday. She's the woman charged with conspiracy to commit murder in the disappearance of Jennifer Dulas, a Connecticut mother presumed dead after vanishing in 2019. This week, the jury heard testimony about the Dulas custody agreement, and the case hit a snag Friday morning. The court had to investigate claims that Michelle had a sealed document on her computer screen during testimony that the public and news crews could see. She'll now face a contempt hearing, but this case will go on first. And this week on Crime Over Wine Weekly, brutal moments captured on tape. The video jurors watched this week in the memory card murderer case, and the comment Brian Smith made during an interrogation that led to his arrest. Plus, a mother of 4 vanishes in Texas, while her family says the key evidence in her disappearance doesn't add up. But first, we have to pop the corks on this week's wine and catch up with Liam and Michelle in the Crime Vineyard. Hey, guys.
Hello, everybody. So first of all, can we just talk about, we have had 2 very, very successful episodes. Obviously, I mean, it's 3 of us. What would anyone else expect? Can we just talk about how this has gone? Like, I'm very, very proud of the progress we've made, even in the last couple of weeks.
I feel like just being a part of it, I feel even more connected into this true crime world even before, because I'm looking for things that I find interesting and want to bring out into the world and learn more. And then also you guys are doing the same, but you guys are picking up on things that I never picked up on. So it's it's trifold, it's super neat. And I really have had a lot of fun with it.
It's been a fun little journey so far. And, I feel like I'm the straggler in the group, because y'all are used to reporting and writing. So this is a bit different for me. And I'm sorry, I'm not good on social media yet. I'll try. I'm promising. I'll get there.
We're getting there. That's a cute little plug. Go follow Michelle and Heather at all their social media pages. Michelle Crime Over Wine, Heather Crime Over Wine, because we're gonna get there. We are gonna get there. We're all learning, right? 100%. But I do think that the one of the big feedback, pieces of feedback that I've gotten since this has launched is just how great it is to first of all be able to keep tabs in all these cases and in a way that we all know how to do, right? Because that's what we do on a regular basis in our full-time jobs, or have done. Some of us have retired. And so but then also too, all the different, we're talking about all these different cases, right? Because on Crime Over Wine, right, get one case that and you dive deep into all this stuff. This is stuff that's playing out right now, and you need just and you really need all you really need is the highlights, right? To kind of in a lot of these cases, we're leaving stuff out intentionally, but just because we don't have time for it. But really, in order to do, the best amount of good in cases that are getting headlines right now, is all you really need to know is just the basics and really just kind of scratch the surface. And then if you want to, you can dive a little bit deeper on your own. So with that being said, we have some wine to talk about.
Get ready. This week we are sipping on Golden Winery's Pinot Noir. They describe the flavor as ripe cherries, strawberry preserves, floral notes of roses, earthiness, and a touch of oak. There's a great balance of fruit and oak on the palate that resembles cherry pie. And there's also a light, refreshing quality of watermelon on the finish. Richness on the mid-palate is enhanced by floral notes indicative of Monterey. The smooth finish and bright acid begs to be enjoyed with food.
Oh, good. Let me go get my snacks then. 1 second. On that note, I don't think wine goes with wheat thins, but we're gonna make it go with wheat thins this week.
But wheat thins go with cheese, and cheese goes with wine.
We're like really a step away. We're really a step
I got the
away
cheese
from
right here.
what we're talking about. Yeah, we can share.
Yeah.
We can share from. But I will say, so sipping on it. So you mentioned cherry pie. I definitely get cherry like right there, right on the in the middle part of the sip for sure. And then floral notes, earthiness, that all is there as well. It's a bit of a different kind of Pinot Noir than what I typically know. And it feels a little bit more not higher end, but a little bit more sophisticated than like a lot of Pinot Noirs that I've drank. And like I think one of you, I think it was Heather, made a comment about like what'd you say? You said that this was a fancier bottle or whatever.
Oh yeah,
because it fancy on us or whatever you said. Yeah, oh yeah, because it had a cork in it. But it does feel a little bit more sophisticated than what I am used to in a Pinot Noir, or at least in the Pinot Noirs that I typically drink.
I'm mostly picking up on the oakiness, but it's also soft, like if that makes sense. As you're drinking it, it's soft on the tongue. So much so that I'm worried that I might accidentally drink more than I should of it because I don't it's just really easy to drink.
I feel that it's definitely very easy to drink. When I saw that we were doing a Pinot Noir this week, I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of like, I don't know if I'm gonna like this, but I like it way more than what I thought. It's very round. I do pick up on the oaky. I do pick up on like the floral. I think it's easy to drink, especially for if you're not typically into like a red, or especially like a Pinot Noir, like this is definitely easy to drink.
Yeah, and I typically don't like Pinot Noirs, y'all. Like I everyone knows I'm a Cabernet girly, and so I am still getting and so I will say what I'm not really loving about this wine is like that earthiness to it that the description's talking about. I'm getting that a little bit in the back, like it's kind of like it is very smooth, it's very round, like Michelle was saying, but then it's a little bit rougher in the back. And that I'm not loving necessarily. And I feel like that's kind of what's throwing me off from like a typical Pinot Noir.
I'm still waiting for
like, we disagree.
I'm waiting for the day where I'm like, I don't like this week, Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Honestly, I haven't had a wine yet. I'm trying to think through my Rolodex. I feel like I feel like I probably have drank one that I've been like, throw that away as soon as I am done with this episode. But I don't think I've had one where I'm like, I can't get through a single glass. You know what I mean? Because wines are just so different. I will say though, there was one that we've drank so far on this episode, that shall remain nameless, that as soon as it was done, I was like, yeah, that's gonna be going down the drain. No comment. Nothing further on that. Thanks.
Was it the rosé?
I will be taking no further questions. Let's talk about the crime of the week. Let's talk about the crime of the week. I think I teased this one up last week pretty well. I think, Michelle, right? That there was a lot to unpack here. I think this was a wallop of a case, for sure. And I want to know what y'all thought about this one, because I have so many thoughts and so many different, theories and avenues. What did y'all think?
I was really intrigued with the Alonzo Brooks case, because I thought, I kind of as I was listening to you guys, I was like, okay, I kind of see it going this way, but then it didn't. And me personally, I think something happened. I think his body was frozen to be stored until they could figure out what was going on. Then I think the search happened and they kind of freaked out / we're like, okay, if there's going to be a time to do something, now is it. And I think they drug his body to that creek or that area where it was found. That's what I think. Yeah,
I keep going back to that frozen theory because I'm that makes sense. It does, but I just don't I didn't see any evidence of that necessarily. But the fact that but again, in that episode of Unsolved Mysteries, the coroner was like, or the pathologist was like, yeah, like this, like didn't seem to be willing to discount it all altogether because of what he saw, which gave me a little bit more hope, a little bit, I guess, that may be a little bit of an explanation there.
But so my question comes in with the issues that kind of came out after this with that medical examiner, you know.
Well, so to be clear, this is a different medical examiner than the one that was interviewed on the documentary is a different medical examiner than the one that was like a little weird, a lot of weird.
Okay, well then I'm glad that you clarified that. And it also does like that whole like second party. Like, so when you guys were talking about that a little bit more towards the end of the podcast, like I had to kind of go back and listen to it again. Do you have any more like that you can share about that? Cause that kind of like caught me.
No, I wish I did. And here's the thing that's like a little bit unclear at this point too, Michelle, because if you remember, like at the beginning of the episode, kind of almost, they did actually talk about a second party, that there were people who left because that was the whole thing with Alonzo and like the confusion potentially around who was his ride home, because there were a lot of people who went to a second party. And so the more I've thought about it and the more I've kind of milled this over since I recorded this episode, I'm not convinced entirely that second party that we originally mentioned that Alonzo's friends had gone to after is not the same party that investigators are talking about. And only because like the second party was very well known from the beginning of this case. And so, but when they talked about this extra party that people had left and gone to allegedly this farmhouse, they specifically mentioned it as a second party as opposed to a third party. You know what I mean? And so that's why I think that there may be some confusion around like what kind of parties were happening that night.
Okay.
Like it's a small town, right? How many parties can y'all really be having?
Oh, listen, y'all, y'all know where I grew up. I grew up in this, and probably not as small of a town as Lacine, but more than you think. Let me tell you, more woods parties, more farm parties than you would guess is all I have to say.
Well, okay then. And I don't know if maybe it's just growing up a girl. But his friends not keeping track of him, Alonzo, where it's like there was definitely the one who was and was like, "Hey, someone watch out for our boy here." Mm. But the other friends just leaving him behind, I don't know. I know I wouldn't do that to any of my friends. Like, is that not something that boys have to be concerned about, like watching out for each other?
Yeah, I mean, my only like guess there, Heather, is that there was just that much confusion / alcohol being drank. You know what I mean? Is that just nobody, like, I wouldn't be surprised if you like asked them in that moment, like, what happened to that friend whose car broke down on the side of the road. I would be willing to bet that most of those friends didn't even know that had happened or that he had left at all. That's just based on what I know about those types of situations.
I do think girls operate way different. You know, I do. Unfortunately, I hate it, but because I am the type that if you're my friend, it doesn't matter male or female. I want to hear from you from the end of the night to make sure that you got home or got to wherever what the plan was. But I do believe that that's a girl thing. Unfortunately, I think girls just have more of the vulnerability, you know? I don't know. In my experience, that's
yeah. Me. Well, yeah, girls are just more aware of their surroundings, I feel like, because that's just how society has worked.
Mm-hmm. I'm tired of you bringing me infuriating cases. Because either...
I live to piss you off. I don't know what to tell you.
Oh, okay, well, fair, because mutual. But like I'm hearing more and more cases specifically that I'm learning about from Crime Over Wine about people of color who it just doesn't make sense how their case ended up that way. Like it shouldn't have been that way, because either you searched thoroughly or there's someone who hid his body from you and then put it there. And the
Right.
fact that they can't definitively be like, yep, that is what happened, makes me think they question their own search abilities.
That's fair. That is fair, because you're right about that. That's a really good point, because if they are so confident in their search abilities, then there wouldn't be a single question as to whether or not he was moved, right? Because if they knew for a fact that the investigators searched that exact spot in the creek and search the creek thoroughly enough to know that the water didn't rise, then you should say for sure, yep, 110%, somebody moved that body. I don't know who did it, and we're gonna find out who did, and they're involved somehow. But that's what happened. You're right, and they should come out a lot more publicly if they are that confident in their search abilities.
And I understand that law enforcement is really limited with what they can say during investigations, because they don't ever want to say something that then can be used in
Right.
court to dismantle all the hard work they have done. But at the same time, we currently live in a time where there is a distrust in police and law enforcement, and that transparency is important. And when you do wrong, owning up to it.
Right. Yeah, I also, and the more I've thought about this case, and I wanted to hear what y'all have to say about this, but talking about that friend who got whose car broke down, I have so many thoughts there, right? Because it just seems as though, like, the friend left, a fight breaks out, possibly more, racial slurs are said, and during all this time, this friend, like, all during the time that this friend happened to be broken down on the side of the road, that it was like the one friend who was supposed to take Alonzo home. Y'all know what I'm going, like, it seems a little too convenient that, like, this mystery happened during the one moment that, or not one moment, but like during the time that, like, the one friend who was, like, actively looking out for Alonzo and, like, making sure he got home safely was gone.
See, I don't know. I feel like every friend group has that one who is the responsible one, who is keeping the peace, who's keeping an eye out for everyone. Even if they've also been drinking, they have the maternal or paternal instincts naturally, that it's like, okay, like, we're going to separate this here. You need to go outside and calm down. And maybe he was that piece in the friend group.
Yeah, that's fair. And he does strike me as that too. Yeah, that would make sense.
And kind of jumping off of that, maybe whoever was having beef with him sensed that person that kind of capped that responsibility, or, you can kind of always sense when there's someone that has responsibility of a group, maybe whoever that person was that did have beef, like, sense that safety person was gone. So if there was going to be a time to be mad, take advantage of the situation, that would be it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's fair. That is fair. I didn't really look at it like that. I was looking at it from the opposite of, like, that this happened while he was gone, not necessarily because he was gone potentially. That would make sense. Man, what a infuriating case, right? According to Heather, in the words of Heather Holley. But I mean, like important too, right? Because again, we're in Black History Month right now. Again, we talked about this when we were talking about Yasmin Akri, and it's important to talk about cases that need help, right? That just specifically of people of color, because they don't get a lot of the attention a lot of times. And this one, I think, would benefit from a lot of light, would benefit from a lot of sunlight, natural sunlight disinfectant. And so I'm convinced that there's someone out there who's holding on to some nugget in some way, shape, or form. I feel like we need to find that person.
So I also wonder, if say if there was like some sort of racial undertone that night at the party, especially with that fight that broke out, I think also we should bring up, is there a possibility that there was some sort of racial undertone regarding the people investigating the case and taking it seriously?
Without a doubt. Yeah, that's again, if we're going down the rabbit hole of this was a bogus investigation that was not thorough and the search was not done properly, then you have to imagine that that his race had something to do with it, right? Because if he was laid out in plain sight and no one looked for him, or no one found him, you have to imagine that they probably weren't looking that hard. That they would have been looking for people who looked like Michelle, Heather, and I.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also, how many people at that party were the children of law enforcement, a judge, or someone else who's best friends with
100%.
them?
Right. Yeah, and again, there's weird things happening, right? And then I go back to, and again, we've been talking about this for a long time. We have a whole bunch of cases to talk about here, so we could talk about this all day. But point being is then I go back to the fact that again, if you're going down with the theory of that he was moved there after the searches had taken place. Remember when we talked about how that if he was moved there within it, again, because they found him within an hour, that somebody must have been tipped off that this search was happening being done by the volunteers, right? Because if they really had been looking for him for weeks, and the volunteers, the amateurs, found him within an hour, that absolutely tells me that somebody was tipped off. Whoever was responsible, whoever had an ear to the ground. And again, there were only a couple people who knew the search was happening, and police were among them. And obviously, the owners of the home, the renters of the home, probably were warned to a certain extent too. But yeah, no, but that's a good point, because there's some sort of connection there for sure. But let's get to our cases of the week. We have cases on the other side of this break that are making headlines this week, including a car and remains that were found in a creek in North Carolina.
But first, the remains of Joseph Augustus Zarelli were found 67 years ago in a wooded area in Philadelphia as of this Friday, February 23rd. For years, he was only known as the boy in the box, but now he has his name back. If you know anything about his death, call the Philadelphia Police Department at 215-686-TIPS or 215-686-8477. You can hear Joseph's full story on episode 25 of Crime Over Wine.
And this Saturday, February 24th, marks 3 years since city maintenance workers in Jacksonville, North Carolina found Jenna Franks, a transgender woman who had been stabbed multiple times. If you know anything about her murder, call the Jacksonville Police Department at 910-938-6414 or the FBI at 704-672-6100. And you can listen to her full story on episode 26 of Crime Over Wine. Crime Over Wine is sponsored by BetterHelp. As someone who's used therapy for years, I know that finding a therapist can sometimes be a stress on its own, juggling your full-time job, your family, your friends, your podcast, and trying to find the right therapist on top of that can almost feel impossible. That's where BetterHelp comes in. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist that works for you on your terms. It's online, it's remote, and by filling out a few questions, BetterHelp can match you to one of 33,000 licensed professional therapists in as little as a few days. And because finding a new therapist is a lot like finding a new bottle of wine, if you don't jive with your therapist, you can easily switch to a new one at no additional cost. You can get 10% off your first month of BetterHelp by going to betterhelp.com/crimeoverwine. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/crimeoverwine for 10% off your first month. Join over 4 million people who decided to get help and get happy with BetterHelp.
This week, investigators recovered a car and human remains in a Washington, North Carolina creek, likely sparking a breakthrough in a decades-old missing persons case. The vehicle was first spotted in Jags Creek with sonar footage. On February 9th, a dive team discovered a car axle and then the remnants of the car. Investigators say only the drivetrain components and parts of the frame are all that remain. The initial search of the submerged car led to the discovery of human remains as well. That's when officials started making a plan to recover the vehicle. They started pumping water out of the creek to help those recovery efforts, and this led to additional human remains being found and sent to the medical examiner's office for further testing. Police say the car parts they've recovered are consistent with a 1975 Chevrolet Camaro, which is what 24-year-old David McMicken, 32-year-old Michael Normal, and 30-year-old William Clifton were last seen driving when they disappeared in 1982. DNA is being collected from the remains to compare to the family of those men. However, Washington police are already confident this recovery is what will close this case.
Wait, but they only found one person?
They found remains, not necessarily full bodies. So I'm thinking if there's that little of the car left, how much can there be left of a human?
I think that's fair, given the conditions, being that there's water involved. And we're talking about since 1982.
Yeah, so when they say human remains, I'm imagining bone, probably, and not put together.
You're lucky to find a couple of bones, yeah.
So do we know anything about the circumstances surrounding their disappearance? They were just last seen driving the car?
They went to a bar. It was a December night, and they were last seen at the bar. It was like an early morning hour. So that's the car the three men were in that night. And I don't know if this is an unfortunate instance of not a well-lit road or intoxication or whatever, or how they ended up in the lake.
There was something similar that happened in Alabama, like literally within the last week or so, where there were three people that had gone missing. I don't know all of the circumstances, but then there was a vehicle that was discovered in a creek. Granted, they hadn't been there for more than 3 decades, but one of the children of one of the men that was in the vehicle, recognized the coat as a coat that he gave his dad. But I can't. It makes you wonder how deep was this creek? How deep was the creek if the part of the axle part of the axle was discovered here recently? You know what I mean? Did the water go down that far?
So I used to live in the area, actually, kind of Washington, North Carolina. It's a very low. It's coastal North Carolina, so that it's lowlands. So I would imagine it's not necessarily what we're thinking of when we think of creeks in Tennessee. It's they're probably pretty, at least slightly more significant in depth, I would guess, anyways.
Yeah, where the axle was found by the dive team was 12 to 15 feet deep.
The naked eye isn't going to see that. You know what I mean?
So definitely keep an eye out for updates on the confirmation of who these men are. But now, what do you have for us this week, Liam?
Oh, so I have a case that we talked about last week. The trial is playing out as we speak. It's the case against Brian Smith. Jury members watched the video that investigators say shows Brian strangling 30-year-old Kathleen Henry to death. Remember last week on Crime Over Wine Weekly, we told you how Smith's defense attorneys cast doubt on the credibility of that video, given how it was turned over to police. Also this week, the prosecution showed the jury photos of a skeleton in the fetal position, as well as video of Brian's interrogation, where he admitted to shooting another woman believed to be 52-year-old Veronica Abuchuk. If you remember, in that interrogation, he admitted to shooting a woman and leaving her along a highway where Veronica's remains were later found. In that same interrogation, Brian claims that if he killed Kathleen Henry, he doesn't remember it. Brian Smith's trial will continue this week and could extend well into March. So just one of those cases. I mean, it's going to be tough, I think, probably for him to get out of a lot of the admissions that he made and a lot of the ways that he documented these murders. But there's also, I feel like, pretty legitimate counters here too, right? Because of kind of potentially, and I didn't watch the video myself. They didn't put it anywhere. They only showed it to the jury. But the if we're talking potentially about a video where the chain of custody is broken and is kind of murky here, I could see where a defense attorney or someone could say, well, we don't know what happened, right, between all of these hands that it was turned over in. But also, I mean, again, he is caught on camera pretty much flatly admitting and certainly not denying 2 different murders.
So for me, that's not a great defense because it is up to investigators to authenticate that video before they're all like, yes, this is evidence.
That's fair.
And then also, how many times are we hearing at the end of the story, any news story, where they're looking for information in a case, you can remain anonymous or whatever. If I can anonymously give them evidence, chain of custody shouldn't be an issue if that evidence is authenticated.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I have to imagine that it certainly the Anchorage Police Department has resources to be able to definitively say whether or not a video is legit or has been altered in some way, shape, or form. I mean that data exists, right? I mean, like, that leaves a trail of data behind in that process. So to that point, but also, I mean, again, last week, I mean, we talked about, how advanced technology is becoming, specifically with artificial intelligence. And so, I mean, is that enough? And again, specifically in Alaska, right, to cast some doubt over this thing, right? Because I could see a lot of people who, again, it's a big, very rural, vast state that's a little bit behind the times. I'll put it that way, in a lot of different ways sometimes. And so I could see a jury pool, being able to be convinced that that things, may not be 100% legit. You know what I mean? It's the same thing in a lot of like rural parts of Tennessee. I could see a lot of rural parts of Tennessee, a lot of people who live in those parts of Tennessee, like, being terrified of AI and not being sure because they're not educated on the uses or the sophistication of AI. I could see where they may be able to exonerate someone for that reason alone, depending on who your jury is.
I think also looking into the length of this trial. So this is for something. This is a long trial in the world of trials. And the fact that they're expecting it to continue another week and possibly into March, I mean, you're looking at another 2 weeks. You're lucky to have a trial last a week, let alone 2 weeks, So, and I wouldn't consider this very high profile. You know what I mean? Maybe because of the location. I don't know, but I wonder, okay, well, if they're already projecting into the next week or so, what more is there to go? So maybe does the prosecution have more to call, like more to prove? Because I feel like the evidence is going to be your biggest element here, right?
Yeah, and well, and a couple things there. I would definitely argue it's pretty high profile in Anchorage. Maybe not nationwide. I would definitely argue that. But I would also say, because a lot of what we talked about already seems pretty incriminating in terms of like what he says on interrogation videos and all that stuff. But I also learned through, reading about what this video was like, that it doesn't actually show Brian's face. It's more of like a POV shot. Which is interesting because that's not how I read it initially. That it's like his hands, if that makes any sense, or someone's hands, allegedly Brian's hands. And so that's I find that kind of interesting because it's it doesn't specifically identify him, but I think it leaves a lot to the imagination for sure.
So, like, whoever the person is that did, like, the person that did this was taking the video as they were doing it. Is that kind of what you're describing?
Correct.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. But it also makes me wonder, kind of talking about the length of trial, like who all does the defense have on tap? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because they get their time. And so, maybe they do have a ton of witnesses that are going to dispute what the state says.
All right, Michelle, what you got this week?
This case continues to captivate people from all over, including us. We're talking about Adam Montgomery. He is that father that's accused of beating his 5-year-old daughter, Harmony Montgomery, to death in the back of the car they were living in, and then hiding her body in multiple places before disposing it where essentially we don't know. Her body has never been found. It took 2 years just for her to be reported missing. This is a tragic case. I think you guys will agree. The more that I watch and I learn and listen to the testimony, my heart goes out to this little girl. I mean, it is tragic.
I've been watching the trial play out all week. I mean, the testimony is, I mean, gut wrenching. There's no words for what has played out in trial this week, as far as I'm concerned.
It's safe to say the testimony's been horrific. A lot of it has centered around Kayla Montgomery. If you're on TikTok or social media and you've come across it, you've probably seen this dark-haired girl kind of describing just these gut-wrenching details. That's Kayla. And if you're kind of wondering, like, her piece in this puzzle, because there's a lot going on, she is Adam Montgomery's estranged wife, not Harmony's biological mother, but she's also the state's star witness. And so that's why she's endured so many hours of testimony, cross-examination, all being on the stand. Essentially, that's what this entire week has been, even parts of last week. She's been a huge part of this case, just about what she witnessed, what she knew about Harmony, her death, what happened to her remains thereafter. And a lot of it centered around hiding her body, because this wasn't something that just kind of happened quickly. It sounds like through her testimony that Adam went through great lengths to hide her body, even where they were staying in like a family transition shelter, and he was hiding her remains in the ceiling of the shelter. And then when it started to smell and there were fluids because the body was decomposing, then he moved the body and moved it to a freezer at a pizza shop where he worked, and then moved it again. We don't know where, because her body and her remains have never been found. But just absolutely heart-wrenching details to sit and have to listen to. And the fact, I mean, this is a very high-profile case. There was a witness yesterday that, when I say yesterday, I mean Thursday, she refused to take the stand even though she had been subpoenaed. She cited the safety of her and her children, saying she was fine if they issued a warrant for her arrest. And I think that really goes to show just the pressure that comes with this high profile case here. You know, that there are people that are afraid for their own safety and the safety of their family for what they might potentially know or witnessed about what happened to Harmony.
Yeah, and there, God, I feel sick to my stomach, first of all. But second of all, like so you're talking about the Kayla, she even said at some point in her testimony, I saw it on some videos about this case, where she was talking about where Adam forced her to transport the body, Harmony, in a stroller.
Mm-hmm.
And she was talking about how how she did that. They asked her, they were like, why did you follow through on this? And she said that she was terrified, because she didn't know what was going to happen. And man, I mean, I just, like, being put in that position, obviously I can never imagine it. I feel like you can say that over and over and over again when it comes to these kind of cases, but I mean, that kind, like, to take part in it personally is, I mean, how do you sleep? You know what I mean? Like, I couldn't imagine. Again, assuming that's what happened, man, I couldn't imagine.
The details really have been very hard to hear. But at the same time, a jury deserves to know. You know what I mean? If they have to make a decision, right, they deserve to know exactly what happened so they can make the appropriate decision.
Yeah, and who they're dealing with, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what He was her father, and these people that are scared of him, what else has he done? Because I'm sorry, if you're murdering a child, you are picking one of the weakest victims. They cannot defend themselves. You're a coward and you're weak, in my opinion. Don't be scared of him. Do what needs to be done so he gets the punishment he deserves and Harmony gets the justice she deserves.
I think there's a big piece of justice here that Harmony deserves. Definitely.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's what, again, kind of, like gets me, I guess, in a lot of different ways is like the helplessness of a child. You know what I mean? It's like, you can't, like, I think about this all the time with the Mariah Woods case, right? That we talked about in episode 6, where it was like, she couldn't even walk, like could barely even walk on her own. And like, it's the same thing. It's almost, I mean, like, this is not, I mean, she's not much, younger than Mariah was. She's slightly more able, I suppose, but it doesn't make any sense to me. I just can't imagine why. I would love to hear what kind of rationale he convinced himself of to do this, if he did indeed do this, right? Again, because the trial is still going on, but man.
Harmony was 5, right?
Yes.
So my son just turned 6, and thinking about how much a child at that age depends on you and comes to you and trusts you. You're their whole world. They depend on you for everything. So the violation of that trust for someone that you created, who you're their entire world, and you're supposed to be providing their future, and you took everything away from them, there's nothing to justify that. Like, I know accidents happen, crimes of passion happen. That doesn't make them excusable, but the amount of effort that allegedly went into this to keep her death hidden and to where her body's never been recovered is unforgivable and inexcusable.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, because one of you two mentioned this before, this is certainly not the first time that some sick action took place inside that home, right? Again, assuming that Adam did indeed do this, there are certainly other things to be discovered about goings on inside the house, in terms of abuse, assault, whatever it may be, and I think that needs to come to light too.
And that's been a lot of Kayla's testimony. I think that's why she's been so important to the state here, is she has shared so much as to what she witnessed, what she endured herself. There was definitely a lot of reports of physical abuse, not only to Harmony, but also with Kayla herself. And that's why she says she was so afraid to do anything. Whether you believe her or not, that's anyone can say that. But I mean, it makes you wonder, what would the state's case look like if she wasn't up there releasing all of these details that she knows?
They probably wouldn't have much of a case, frankly.
Mm-hmm.
Man. All right, when we come back from the break, we have 3 missing persons cases for you, including a Valentine's Day mystery, one involving a birthday party, and also a mother of 5 from North Carolina.
But first, this past Saturday, February 17th, marked 6 years since Ryan Stuka disappeared in Sun Peaks, British Columbia. If you know anything, call the Kamloops Royal Canadian Mounted Police at 1-800-222-8477 and hear his full story on episode 53 in Crime Over Wine.
Get ready for that big test with Study.com. Study.com offers learning materials and test prep, even LSAT study prep guides for all of my legal nerds listening. Unfortunately, there aren't any wine study guides, and believe me, I did check. Listeners can get 30% off their first 3 months of any subscription level using the promo code CrimeOverWine. Again, that's promo code CrimeOverWine, no spaces, for 30% off your first 3 months at Study.com. Learn faster, stay motivated, study smarter with our sponsor, Study.com.
Hello, Crime Over Wine listeners. I am Rachel.
And I'm Heather.
We are the hosts of Like Mother, Like Murder.
We bring you the good, the badass, and the crime.
Each week, we bring you stories from missing and murdered
to survivors and women who empower you.
And of course, some mom talk sprinkled in.
Check us out wherever you get your podcasts at Like Mother, Like Murder.
And give us a follow on social media so that we can say hi.
Okay, love you, bye.
Okay, love you, bye.
So this week I have a case about a missing person that took place over Valentine's Day. It was a 9-year-old girl named Aisha Degree. And this past Valentine's Day marked 24 years since she was last seen. She went missing from Shelby, North Carolina. Police say that Aisha went missing from her bedroom sometime between 2:30 and 6:30 in the morning on February 14th of 2000. There was no sign of forced entry into the home, and police dogs have never been able to pick up on her scent. Investigators did receive tips that she had been seen walking along a highway between Shelby and Falston, North Carolina, around 4 that morning, but when at least one witness turned around to check on her, she ran off into the woods. More than a year after Aisha went missing, a local store owner called police when they found a backpack buried behind a tool shed that they owned. The backpack belonged to Aisha, but inside the bag was a book that Aisha had checked out from the school library and a New Kids on the Block t-shirt that Aisha's parents are confident did not belong to her. As of 2020, Aisha's mother said that she believed Aisha was still alive. Since she was reported missing, the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office received more than 700 tips related to her disappearance, but none of those tips has resulted in a specific location for where Aisha may be. If you know anything about Aisha's disappearance, call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822 or contact the FBI at tips.fbi.gov. There is a $45,000 reward for information that leads to Aisha's location. And y'all, like, the backpack situation floored me when I wish y'all could have seen my face when I first read that. Like, how I have so many questions. I don't even really understand how the store owners found this backpack, but okay. But the fact that there were because they did say for sure, when they first were investigating Aisha's case, they were saying that it looked as though she had packed up because her backpack was gone and stuff. But the fact that then it was found with stuff that did not belong to her blows my mind.
I just wonder, what are the reasons as to why a 9-year-old would want to leave, their home? You know what I mean? Yeah. I get that is, a thing. I get it. But I think kind of looking into the reasons as to why, if she did pack up something, what are the reasons as to why that would surround that? I think that's a big question.
Yeah, I think the obvious answer, in my opinion anyways, is she probably didn't leave. I feel like I think that it's pretty clear, I think, potentially that, maybe at first she, wandered off in some way, shape, or form. But then also I think about the car turning around and going to go talk to her and then her running off. That tells me that maybe she was she was scared of something or someone whose t-shirt is important. It could be, is it a perpetrator or is it another victim?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if it's the right size for Asia, but not hers, does that mean, is it a trafficking situation and there was another child who had it on at some point?
Right. And why was it buried where it was? Why was it buried at all, obviously, but why was it buried where it was is kind of interesting. I'm sure they had to look into those store owners, but I wonder, who knew that little space was back there? You know what I mean?
And in 2000, you had no surveillance cameras on the exterior of your store that caught anything?
Well, it was it was behind a tool shed kind of area. So that's, I'm assuming that you don't have a camera back there. So it sounded like to me it was fairly well hidden. And also too, it was a year later when they found it. And so most things back there, the cloud didn't exist. It was tapes that you had. And so I'm sure they were thrown away if they still had them at all.
A year after she went missing, or they think that backpack was there for a year before they found it?
They found it a year after she went missing.
So she could have been out there for almost a year and had recently left it there if she is still alive and
Yeah, well, yeah, it could have hypothetically been placed there anytime between, when she went missing in February, and I think this was found in like August of 2001, if I remember correctly, or sometime like it was a little more than a year after she went missing. And so it hypothetically could have been put there anytime between those 2 points. All right, Michelle, what you got this week?
So my case this week is something that is literally going on minute by minute. We're talking about Chalise Angel Welch. She's 24 years old, out of Dallas. She was last seen on February 3rd. She wasn't reported missing until February 12th. She's a mother of 4, and what happened the night that she went missing, she went to a birthday party at a hotel. Essentially, I think a young mom, especially a 4, she deserves a night to relax. You know what I mean? Have fun with her friends. And friends of hers saw her leaving that night with an unknown man. She hasn't been seen or heard from since. But what we do know is that she left a jacket and other items at the hotel, and her phone was last pinging at the hotel. Now, her family says she would never leave her children. And to help kind of put this into perspective for you, she missed her youngest child's first birthday. That happened just a couple of days ago. So what mother would really do that willingly? You know what I mean? Think about that. Her family believes that her phone had been tampered with. And the reason why they believe that, they won't go deep into the details, but they say that the service provider is telling them that her phone had been tampered with. So if you have any information, call the Irving Police Department. Again, this is out of Dallas, Texas. That phone number, 972-273-1010. And this is for Chalise Angel Welch, 24 years old, last seen on February 3rd in Dallas.
So is it possible, so they said that the phone was last pinged at the hotel that she was at. Is it possible that that is what they think was tampered with? Or like, I guess that the phone tampering is something I'm interested in.
Don't know if someone has the ability to tamper with how a phone pings, but I do wonder if maybe calls or text messages may have been deleted from the phone. You know what I mean? So think about it. You can delete things from a phone, but if you pull like the report from the actual provider, that's going to show things that you can't delete something from the actual report. So
right.
That's just my opinion. That's kind of what I'm thinking, but it could be enough to show, if the phone that the family has and the report that the provider has, and if they're not matching up, then there is potentially some tampering there. Then that could be evidence to police, especially later on.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. If that's what we're talking about, that something might have been deleted, that would make a solid amount of sense to me, because then if text, how would a phone carrier be able to tell for sure, where what kind of text messages were sent by somebody else, or what kind of phone calls were made by somebody else? So that makes sense. I am kind of curious though, because the fact that her phone, they made note that her phone was last pinged at the hotel, and maybe I'm fixating on this a little bit too much, but it just seems, because then she's seen leaving. I guess that's what I'm fixating on, is that if she's seen leaving the hotel, and then, or maybe it's happened before, or whatever, that the phone was last pinged at the hotel. How do you go off with some man, with some guy, and not bring your phone with you? You know what I mean?
I can see that. Possibly, maybe they were going to get some cigarettes, or maybe something to drink, or maybe even they were hungry and they were going to go pick up some food. And maybe her phone was charging, so she was like, this is just going to be really quick, because I could see someone leaving a jacket and personal items, so I'm probably assuming some keys. If you truly think that you're just going to kind of go out and come back, then you don't have any reason to bring everything with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and we're definitely in the assumption mode here for sure. But then maybe also, I mean, just the fact that she's 24, she has 4 kids. Maybe she just wanted to leave the phone behind. I mean, I'm telling you, like I had to turn my phone off many times this week because my phone would not stop ringing, and I don't even have 4 kids. So maybe she was just like, you know what, like I'll just leave this here because kind of what you're saying. I'll be right back, and I'll just and just because I want to enjoy myself for 30 minutes without having to worry about whether or not my babysitter is going to call or whoever is watching your kids.
And I think you bring up a good point. A mother is always going to wonder about her children. So I think, she wouldn't have, if she didn't know that she wasn't going to be right back there, I don't think she would have left that lifeline, to her kids.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But then also too, I mean, I see all these cases all the time about like moms who just like need a break. You know what I mean? That just need like an evening to themselves and like and that's when their guard is let down. So, I mean, who knows who this guy is? Someone probably does out there, but it seems as though that's kind of part of the situation here is that, Chalice's, guard was just let down for one night because she needed it.
I don't know, because like the mom guilt is real because you need that time alone and you need that time out because you can't pour from an empty cup. You got to take care of yourself. But I know when I do go out, I feel so guilty for not being right there with my kids. So I will have the phone even if I know I need that time away, so that voluntarily leaving the phone, even if it's just for a minute, isn't something I could do as a mom.
Yeah, that's kind of where I land too. Like, you never know when your kids need you. Yeah. I'm getting weird feelings about this one. I mean, I guess it's also possible that like if she left with an unknown man, like maybe they came back, to Michelle's point, like maybe they just went to go get cigarettes and were coming back to the hotel to do whatever. So like maybe that's when the phone pinged. So I think that I would be interested to know what time that ping happened.
I think that's fair. All right, Heather, what do you have for us this week?
Well, my case, I feel, is eerily similar to yours, Michelle. Marissa Carmichael is a 25-year-old mother of 5 from Greensboro, North Carolina. She went missing January 14th after calling 911 from a gas station. Marissa told dispatchers a man stole her phone and she was stranded there and needed help. When an officer arrived moments later, Marissa wasn't anywhere in the area. This week, police released new details in the search for Marissa, saying surveillance video shows her getting into a man's car. Police say they have identified and interviewed him, and he's only considered a witness at this point. Investigators won't comment on if they suspect foul play is involved, but did issue a statement earlier this month saying they were becoming, quote, increasingly concerned for her welfare. Marissa's family spoke to ABC this week, saying they're devastated and they believe she's being held against her will. Marissa Carmichael is described as a biracial woman with long black and blonde braids. She's 5'4" and has a heart and butterfly tattoo on her face. She was last seen wearing a white Tweety-bird shirt, blue jeans, and yellow sneakers. If you know anything about Marissa Carmichael's whereabouts, call the Greensboro Crime Stoppers at 336-373-1000.
I really worry about this with her saying that a man stole her phone and that she was stranded.
Yeah, so, and this was in an early hour of the mornings between 2 and 4 a.m. in that time frame, and she coincidentally had also been at a party that night and had told her friends not to tell her mom because she didn't want her to worry about her. Or no, she went to a club and then an after party at an Airbnb. And it was the Airbnb where the person who was supposed to she was supposed to get a ride from there and ended up being stranded at the gas station and her phone stolen.
See, that's a lot. That's a lot going on there.
Yeah, that is a lot. And I guess I'm wondering, like, the fact, I don't know, and was this like them specifically saying that there may or may not be foul play involved, or is that just like Heather saying that they just haven't said one way or the other?
That was them declining to comment after they released the new tales this week about identifying and interviewing the man whose car she was seen getting into.
That's so interesting. And also the fact that they only, like, what else do they know that they haven't shared if the last person she was seen with is only considered a witness? Or are they just saying that to, like, not get, like, let him know that they're on to him?
Maybe because it was the no foul play was one of those kind of generic cop answers of, it's an ongoing case, we can't comment on that.
It's not a crime for someone to get into your car. And so, yeah, just speaking with that last person will at least give them a couple more details to point them in the direction as to where she may be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then regarding her phone, it has been turned off since that night. So either the battery's dead or the person who allegedly stole it in the first place turned it off when they did. And her mom also says that Marissa is an avid social media user and none of her accounts have been touched since that night.
Interesting. Yeah, I think that says a lot for sure. Again, we talk all the time about, like, you know, normal behaviors for somebody, and that, you know, clearly her normal behaviors are altered. So, and so to be clear, 100%. So she called 911 from the gas stations specifically because someone stole her phone.
She's stranded, and she asked for help to get help getting home.
Okay, but by the time an officer got there, she wasn't there.
It was a maybe 5-minute window there.
Yeah,
but that is something that has infuriated her mother, that she talked about this week, of much like Zoe's episode, Alonzo. She called police saying she needed help. They went out there, didn't see anything, didn't think anything of it, went about their day. When she wasn't there the next morning, her mom knew that wasn't right and went to police, and they told her she had to wait 48 hours to file a missing person report.
Oh my God.
And so by then it's the middle of the week, and at this point her mom had already started her own investigation.
Oh my God. Listen, we all know how I feel about the stupid 24-hour rule. The bogus ass 48-hour rule is ridiculous. I mean, why is that the magical time frame for when people decide to come back from being missing? I mean, that doesn't make any fucking sense. But also, so it's sure that much, but like also like going back to the original thing about how they showed up and she wasn't there, and so they went about her life. Like, I think about all the times that officers, how many times a night do officers respond to a call and it turns out to be nothing. So that's sure, okay, cool for me as far as I'm concerned. But that, oh my God, that doesn't make any sense. The fact you're gonna tell them to wait 2 full days when somebody is simply gone.
And I think
and also nothing either. Sorry, I have to say this, Heather, only because on top of that too, the fact that you that she called for help because somebody stole her shit.
And that's what I was gonna say, is I think that is, it's not that police did respond and responded in a timely manner, within the national average, from what's being reported here.
Sure.
And that they didn't find her. It's that I came to you the next morning saying my daughter's still not home. She called you for help last night, right, and she wasn't there. So we need to elevate this because something's not right. And they're like, come back in 2 days.
Man, see if she decides to turn back up in 2 days. I'm warm talking about this. I'm warm.
Yeah, it has all the elements of the things that infuriate us in all those cases, of asking the family to wait when they know something's wrong. Is it not being taken seriously enough? Are they not looking hard enough? She's a biracial woman. Is that playing into any of the coverage? And the family has started a GoFundMe in hopes to hire a private investigator, hoping to get further in finding her.
Because they can't trust their own local police department to do it the right thing, and I don't blame them.
I really get this sense of I feel like we should do some sort of special episode of what should people do if they find a loved one in a situation. You know what I mean? Because you know, what is the standard? Here we are, like, here we've talked about how many cases these last 3 weeks, and it's been, the timeline is different for every single one. Like, do you wait 24 hours? Do you wait 48 hours? Do you wait any hours when you're reporting someone missing? You know, like, kind of what should a loved one or just someone who knows something isn't right, what should they do on their side? And then what, I think that something like that would be really valuable, and helping get that out into the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I'll be the first to say, you know, again, my paranoid ass, you know, will report someone missing, you know, like if they're 5 minutes outside of their normal, you know, behaviors. Like Heather was a little bit late to this recording this morning. No offense, Heather. I'm not coming after you. I'm just saying, and I was getting ready to call police. I was close to calling police because Heather was a little bit late. And so I'm fine. Cause Heather is never late to anything. And so I was like, that's just how my brain goes. And so I'll always, you know, I'll just always say to the end of time, if you are out there and someone in your life is one step out of their normal behaviors, call somebody, right? Like, that's what I have to say. And don't take no for an answer. Do not let people deny you the right, you know, or the ability to get an investigation started here. I'm like, I'm getting warm just thinking about this, because things could have gone so differently if police just did their damn job to begin with here. So I frankly hope someone from Greensboro Police Department is listening to this, because somebody needs to be held accountable here, because something's not right. Well, Heather, you're gonna have to keep us updated on Marissa's case, because I'm interested. I'm into it. Please let us know as soon as possible. And also, again, another little plug to follow us on social media, because if we're not going to wait a whole week to tell you if there's an update in our case, we're going to post it on our social media pages first. So follow us on Crime Over Wine on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Follow, you know, Michelle and Heather and myself on all of our social media platforms, because that's where we stay the most active. We only post episodes here once a week, but we are on the social medias every single day. Man, what an episode. We're an hour and a half in, y'all, from the raw recording. And man, I think we could probably have even more to talk about these cases for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's the Pinot Noir or the rage fueling us at injustice, but we're all a little hot here. And,
I think there's another podcast episode started of just us like screaming into the abyss about these cases.
Yeah. So before we get started on that, let's go ahead and say goodbye here.
That's fair.
Thanks for listening, everyone. And if you can't get enough of Crime Over Wine, follow us all on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And we'll see you next Sunday for the next episode of Crime Over Wine Weekly. And we'll see you this Wine Wednesday for your regularly scheduled episode of Crime Over Wine.
Proud member of the Podnuga Network.